Welcome, data people. We are Zuma. My name is Matt, and this is Data for Good. This podcast is brought to you by Zuma. Zuma is a dedicated recruitment company for senior data, insights, and analytics professionals, connecting you with Berlin's most influential companies. The Data for Good podcast is for the world of data analytics and engineering, giving you access to the thoughts and opinions of Berlin's most successful data people. Today, we are joined by Elizabeth Press, founder and creator at D3M Labs and director of data at Babbel. Looking forward to this episode. Elizabeth is going to talk to us about data as a strategic partner. Elizabeth, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you. Very well. The summer, it was a good time. We're starting to get towards the end of the year. Are you looking forward to what might come in the future?
Yes. First, I'm going on a road trip in France. I've been waiting for that since 2020, actually.
Long overdue trip.
Yes.
Fantastic. So today we're here to talk about data as a strategic partner. So this is an area that you have huge passion for. So first of all, how did you become so involved?
So involved in data, in the data scene.
Exactly, yeah.
I've been living in Berlin for a very long time. So I first came to Berlin when I was 19, and I'm not saying what year that was. But suffice to say, I've been here in various scenes in Berlin. And when I came back to Berlin in 2012, I was a data professional at Dell. So getting involved in the burgeoning data scene here in Berlin was really just a natural continuation of my social life, of my professional life, and just being around this awesome city and how it has grown and continues to grow.
And how much would you say it has changed over the years and evolved to what we see in the data world now?
In terms of data, I think, in terms of data in Berlin, when I first came here, it was, data and business intelligence was really Google Analytics and SQL. It was very, what I would say, technocratic in a very limited sense, even. So I had been living in Frankfurt and working with Dell, working also in the financial industry in Frankfurt. And when I came back here, I was somewhat surprised by the very strong technical orientation that wasn't matched by a commercial orientation. So I felt that in Frankfurt, it was much more commercially oriented, and that maybe some other cities had a very much healthier balance between technical and commercial. So that was something that I noticed quite quickly. But I think that as the scene has grown, as the economy has grown, there's been a lot of startups that have been started, a lot of international companies moving to Berlin, just as the economy's been growing because of other factors, Brexit and whatnot, that Berlin has become now the first port of call and not London. And there's other factors as well that you just have a lot of players in the market that are more commercially oriented than maybe some of the homegrown ones that were very present here in terms of percentage of presence, if you want to put it that way, back in 2012, 2013. So I think that analytics and data has grown and it's matured, and it's beyond just, SQL queries, which are a very important part of data, but it's not the only part.
I've heard people compare where data is at to maybe adolescent years with a lot of potential and a lot more learning to be fulfilled. where would you agree with that?
Yeah, if you want to say that, yeah, that it's an awkward teenager at this point that doesn't know which way it wants to go, um, or how it wants to define itself.
And which way to go and how to move forward is very important to have a roadmap. And I think data creating a roadmap is something that you have always been, or more recently, been very involved in. Could take the form of strategy. How could we set up a data roadmap to be more informed?
So I think a data roadmap is not separate from a company roadmap. And I think that that's something that is maybe not communicated by a lot of people or practiced by a lot of people or enough. So the company roadmap, the company strategy is something that should be overarching. So a company should have a clear strategy and a clear identity of how it wants to position itself on the market, where it wants to go, and then all of the different functions need to support that, and data being one of that, part of that. So I think data needs to be part of a holistic discussion and not by itself.
So what are the biggest mistakes usually made when trying to achieve this?
When trying to create a data roadmap, I think that often enough, what I've seen is that data people as a tribe, and maybe I'm part of that too, we talk to each other and we really love talking to each other, which every function does in every profession. But we have a really hard time communicating what we do to other people and getting them to appreciate us in the same way we appreciate ourselves. And I think that that's part of it. Everyone knows that data is somehow important. It's the next oil and whatever. But somehow getting beyond these big headlines and really understanding the hows and the whys and how to make data part of the commercial fabric of a company, that's something that is missing in a lot of the strategic discussions I think that are going on. I think the data sometimes has its roadmap for that roughly is parallel to the strategy. It's people know that it has to follow the strategy, but sometimes it's very much parallel and something that's made separate to the discussions that are about the actual strategy.
For a company or a team that aren't so mature with this, what first steps could we take?
So I think it's very, sitting down and just talking to people. As simple and complicated as that might be, being able to maybe for the CEO and the C-suite to formulate a clear company strategy, which is also a task that some C-suites are better at than others. But having that really simple and understandable formulation of who the company is and where they want to go and how they want to get there, and being able to involve all the different functions in that conversation is something that has to start with the C-suite and the CEO. And then data should be part of that discussion in a way that every other function should be part of that discussion. So how is the company going to use data to reach their goals? Is there a data monetization strategy that's straight out? Is there going to be an algorithmic product? Is data part of the innovation? Are they actually a data innovator, a market leader? Or are they just doing what everyone else does to stay competitive? Or are they going to be a laggard and they focus on some other part of the business where they're going to have their unique selling point, and that's not going to be data. So let's have these discussions and have them really openly and holistically as part of the company. And as I said, data is part of that. Also part of that is the insights that data needs to deliver. So how are we going to define the North Star metrics, the KPIs, the key performance indicators, how we break down those key performance indicators into a first and second level, what some people call a KPI tree. How are those used? How do we visualize those? What are the frequency of decisions being made, and who has to make those decisions to actually tactically support whatever the strategy is? You know, how do we actually define the OKRs? How do we define the different KPIs to make sure that we're, you know, on track and that we're healthy? You know, all of that needs to be also discussed with data, with the analysts, with the analytics part of data. And then of course there's the infrastructure. So who needs to access what? You know, what are the user groups for the different dashboards? You know, are there dashboards that everyone in the company could see? Are there specific users that could see certain dashboards? Are there power users? Are there actually technical stakeholders embedded in the units? What do those interfaces look like, and who's going to be actually using the data infrastructure? You know, what's really important? You know, do we are payment events really important? Do we want to, how important are events in how we define, you know, the customer life cycle journey? How is that actually used in the decision making? So having these really holistic discussions will help us actually define what we want to prioritize when it comes to data, and how data is going to work with the different business units in a company and the C-suite to actually enable the company to reach that strategy. That's, I think, part of this. That's the way the discussion needs to go.
So involving data in the strategic decisions that align with the goals. How do we prove the value of the insights that we are achieving for the business? What are good indicators that we are getting the return on investment from our data teams?
This is a very difficult one. It also is not only in the hands of data. You know, sometimes I'll put up on social media that people who Slack data with random ad hoc requests, for example, are destroying that ROI in some ways, because they're destroying the planability of the data team and their ability to actually action a roadmap. And there's other behaviors that are not completely in the hands of the data team. Of course, one could say how you react to other people is in your hands, but there's also relationships and whatnot. But going beyond that, to your question, the most, I would say, the most positive process I've seen was a process in which every month I would sit down together with the C-suite and the senior stakeholders, and I would make a monthly Kanban board of all the priorities that the data function has. And each team member would have certain priorities that were put on them, or the different teams, the different projects, things that could be reasonably done within a month. You know, allowing also for things like ad hoc requests that just come up, and you know, some of this is unavoidable without, you know, trying to have a culture of ad hoc requests and just being a concierge service. but there's a good middle ground. So allowing for some flexibility in that, but also talking with the C-suite. Look, these are the really important things that need to get done this month. You guys have asked us that. I have signed off on that as a leader, that this is also something that's doable and valuable as well. Let's get these done. And then looking at, how well these were actioned. I think what's sometimes really difficult is to separate what's clearly in a data team's power and what's not.
Okay.
Some people say, oh, they should have shared ownership of a KPI, and that might be partially right. But there's also the argument, well, the business, performance marketing actually does their job, and it's their quality of execution that that contributes to ROAS or CLV to CAC and stuff like that. That's not totally in the data team's realm. On the other hand, you could say, in the long term, if we do create a really good attribution model, if we create very good visualizations, that should help. So, having these, like, the data team has done, has delivered an attribution model that has this level of granularity, this level of, reporting against certain dimensions, this type of visualization that the data team probably has thought up of, but it also meets the performance marketing team's requirements in terms of what's visually understandable and helpful to them. This is, I think, a way that data teams can have their performance evaluated. You could also say there's OKRs. We want to have an actionable attribution model that is scalable across all European countries on these and these and these dimensions, and having these and these metrics, whatever. There's different ways to formulate, the OKRs and the goals in a way that is specific enough to capture the stakeholders' requirements and needs, and also focus on what a data team is responsible for, right? Try to make this a bit measurable.
Yeah.
There's no exact answer to this, because performance marketing, for example, they have metrics that are very clear. A salesperson has metrics, and that's pretty clear, the sales numbers. There's not really a silver bullet for the data teams, just better practices and less optimal practices.
It sounds like there's a lot of trust required from the business in the data team. And if we dig a little bit deeper into the data team, there's different roles and different responsibilities. So all come with their own skill sets and experiences. Talk us through the different roles within a data team and a data org.
Yeah, okay, good question. On a high level, I see the data team as being very hybrid. If you look at traditional functions, you have more of the analytics that are very business and data storytelling focused. And then you have data engineering. And I would say data engineering has a lot in common with software engineering. And I know a growing number of people say it is actually part of software engineering. And data scientists, honestly, I would say that they're more towards the software engineers.
Go on.
But that might be a little bit of a point that people like to discuss. But so analysts, data analysts, business analysts, whatever you want to call them, BI analysts, they are responsible for creating KPIs, for creating dashboards, for making deep dives, for basically getting insights out of the data and putting them into a business context that empowers decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully the way they do that is really impactful and gives people a lot of surprise, maybe not surprises, but spurs a lot of thought and makes for decisions that would be not possible without data, and not possible in terms of that you get to just this higher quality of decision making that you could not do if you didn't have access to that data.
Mm.
But there's a lot of art in that, and a lot of sitting back and thinking, okay, how do I best contextualize? How do I best visualize? How do I best narrate? So there's a lot of creativity and soft skills in this. I think as you go to the other spectrum, like data engineering, that's a lot more like software engineering, and where you actually get a lot of the methodology that has been really successful in software engineering seeping into data engineering. So there's DevOps that's going into data ops, that's going into ML ops, so machine learning operations. And all of this is meant to professionalize and scale data engineering and also machine learning, also data science. And data science, creating algorithms. Algorithms are software. So this is software engineering. If you want to be, strict, put labels on things.
Yeah.
Where I feel like analytics is much more of the storytelling and this delivery, putting even self-serve is a lot about product management, a lot about UX.
Yeah.
And, I think that design thinking, and if we could also train people in UX and findability, usability, this would do a lot for self-service analytics.
And I think that is the end goal for a lot of companies is self-service analytics. I think it goes back to the adolescent analogy that we use, that still growing, but there's a lot of best practices that are still to be developed within data that we can learn from the successful times of business areas such as software engineering, and we move closer and closer to data as a profession. Now, moving up the tree, I guess, from the data engineers and the data analysts would be a chief data officer. So it's not seen in most companies, but I'd really be interested to understand your thoughts on, is a chief data officer a good idea?
I think that there's not one organizational design that's a good idea or a bad idea. It has to be fit to the situation and appropriate for the company at hand. I mean, do I think that every company needs a CDO, chief data officer? Probably not. Okay, don't ask me what companies don't and what companies do, but probably a search engine does. Okay,
Right.
Probably an online marketplace does. Are there other companies that, where data is not deserving of a CDO position and it could be somewhere else? Probably. I think the important part is that data needs to be looked at holistically and part of the strategy, and also, like I say, a strategic partner, not a service function, and not a concierge function, which I think sometimes it goes into actually, yeah, more of a concierge function than you'd have like an IT desk even being. Um, and and I don't think that data should also be its ivory tower silo that is like impenetrable and not understandable to other people, but seen as this really valuable thing that nobody understands. That also is not right. So I think you have to look at what the organization needs and what their
Yeah.
strategy is and what their culture is, and then you have to design the data organization to fit that.
And that design, there is central or federated. For those who aren't familiar, can you share the difference between the two?
Yeah, so you have central teams, you have distributed teams, and then you have embedded or people. In my world, at least, how I call things. A central team is under a head of data, CDO. Call this person what you want. The data responsible for the entire company runs the central data team, and it's a separate entity that's only responsible for data. A distributed team is a team that is a data team, but reports ultimately to the chief marketing officer or the chief financial officer. So it's a team that is within another function, like a business function, but it's a data team. An embedded analyst or an embedded data engineer is a single professional that is embedded in a cross-functional team. And you see this very often in product analytics, where the product analyst is embedded in some product team, and there's a team that consists of a designer, a product manager, a data analyst, and whatnot. And that's where you see a lot of it. But it's also becoming a much more popular model. So a federated data structure is a data structure that has many more of these distributed and embedded aspects.
Okay. So it's a bit of a mix between the different setups.
I think most companies have some hybrid function. And I believe that the hybrid function is probably the best way. And in reality, the pendulum swings a little bit back and forth in most companies. It's this sort of way things work. Management changes. So one manager will say, hey, a centralized function really works because we need to gather all the data people together and action really big projects. And, we get more synergy with when we have a centralized function. And then this gets to be a silo. So the pendulum swings, and then they say, hey, let's break up the silo and put it back to the business so that the data people are closer to the business. And then people say, hey, the data people are too out of sync with each other. And we have to go back the other way. And it just goes a little bit back and forth in most organizations I've seen.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot to learn and a lot to do better moving forward. Now, we could go deeper and deeper and talk a lot more about these topics. We don't have infinite amounts of time. So something that I think everyone would be really interested to hear more about is D3M Labs and your work there. So yeah, tell us a little bit about D3M Labs, how it started and your inspirations.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So back in 2015, when I left Dell, I thought, it would be really great to take a lot of the learnings I had at Dell and the successes I had and productize that to the Berlin market, which I felt was a little bit lagging in commercial sophistication behind the US or the Austin market. Okay, so that was the spirit of D3M Labs. So I actually wanted to productize that and have it be a platform for small and medium businesses to learn about BI. I was actually in an accelerator, learned a lot. It didn't get past the seed phase, but it turned then into a consultancy, and I ran my business for 5 years and had some really great clients. I worked with Beta House in Berlin,
Nice.
also Rolls-Royce. I worked with some NGOs in New York City, Film Shop, the German Foreign Office. So it was really a really interesting mix of clients that I had. But after 5 years of self-employment, I thought, it was great, but it would be also really good to be a head of business intelligence at
Mm.
Lingoda. And that's where I then turned D3M Labs into a blog, actually, and had that be my own thought leadership vehicle and lead up. So I started at Lingoda and I went through some more scale ups until I got to Babbel. And I use D3M Labs as my thought leadership vehicle. And now it's gotten mature enough that people also want to join me and become guest bloggers. So really taking that spirit of how do we actually bring commercial mindedness
Hmm.
to data and really make data work well for companies, for investors, and also for the people working in data. How do we
Mm.
make their working lives better?
It's amazing the work that you've done. For those who aren't aware, what is a thought leadership vehicle? What does it entail?
So it means that I write down my thoughts, and I consider them thought leadership. It's very much in the eyes of the beholder, but it's really putting thoughts out into the world for other people to pick up on.
That's amazing. Sharing your experiences and your knowledge and hoping that someone reads it and it improves um, themselves personally or professionally. It's fantastic. We need more people like you doing things such as that. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing with that. Us sharing that with us, and you have taught us a lot today. We could have spoken a lot longer. I think some of these topics lead very nicely into a future podcast, and we would love to have you on again. I know you've got some exciting times ahead, but that is all time. That's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for your insights, Elizabeth. It's been educational and topics that everyone will want to know more about. So the listeners, as always, drop your questions and feedbacks into the comment section. We will pick some out and have them answered on future podcasts. Don't forget to share and like the video so we can reach as many people as possible. But from myself and Elizabeth, it is goodbye. So thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, ciao for now.
Ciao. Thank you.